So, bro, in your best month, how much cash collected did you do in like 30 days?
300,000 myself. And then now obviously through the consulting businesses and all that, a couple hundred grand.
And all of that, you're pretty much making more than the whole team combined. And how old were you then?
I was 17. That's right after I turned 17.
Damn, bro. So I heard that you had two agencies before. Your top closer on two different amazing offers,
Yeah.
getting 300K cash collected, made at a $30 million top Inc. 500 company called Seventh Level, led by this dude named Jeremy Minor. I'm sure a lot of people listening to this have heard about him. And over $2.5 million the dude has across all social platforms. And now you're kind of good friends with. Is this kind of all what you've had done in your background?
Yeah. And now launching the consulting stuff. And obviously that's done pretty good. But yeah, it's a good little summary.
Awesome. Incredible, bro. So today, could you tell us how you're kind of like a loner, loser drug addict in high school, and you started this fitness influencer agency, which a lot of my viewers, they know about the growth operating stuff, which is what you did as well. And then how you went from there to hitting that 300K cash collected a month as a closer today here on the Tim Yoon Show.
Yeah, so I'll kind of give a brief description. So I grew up really loving parents, great. Obviously, dad super super driven. But then my brother, he had some issues with drugs and stuff at some point in his life, and so it led me to grow up very alone in a sense, very independently. And so it led me to me maturing a lot faster. And I'm not gonna play the victim or anything. It was the best thing that happened to me, right? But it did lead me to become a lot more mature at a much younger age than most people would, and take more accountability for myself as a whole, for my own outcomes, my own destiny. And so that was kind of what got me into everything and gave me that competitive drive of wanting to be better, wanting to do more, because I wanted to be able to show for it.
I see. And then from there, you started using hey, I now felt kind of like an outsider at school, and you felt like you weren't respected. Could you kind of tell me about that?
Yeah. So right coming off of that, at the beginning, it was very much a thing of trying to cope with it. And that's how I got into drinking and partying and drugs, all that stuff.
What was the craziest thing you did during that era in your life?
It's a really funny story. I was at a party one time and I was blackout drunk. I got a pen and I cracked it in half and I got a sewing needle and then I tatted myself on my leg at the party. And so I still have that tat to this day. And then I got infected that same night.
I heard you say butt and I was like, bro, did some butt stuff with the pen?
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
All right.
So that was my intro of my first way of channeling all that stuff that happened. After that, it became sports. Okay, I need to find an outlet of putting this competitiveness, this sense of I need to prove something to myself, to the world, to something else. And so at the beginning, because I didn't felt I fit in. Socially, I didn't feel like I was in the right crowd of people that were around me. Being made fun of in school, all that stuff. The usual kind of for entrepreneurs, if you will. And at the beginning, it became sports because I felt me feeling this inferior to everybody else around me. What's my way of being superior? Beginning in high school, it's always oh, well, the football player and this and this and that bullshit. And so at the beginning, it became a sports thing. And so I would go into soccer and I'd play 5 hours a day alone, just playing the ball against the wall, dribbling, doing drills. I didn't even have cones because I couldn't afford them. So I'd put a helmet or a shoe and stuff, and I'd start dribbling around those, anything else. And it worked out at the beginning. I became semi-pro. I went to the leagues, but then I got injured. And so I broke my holding on my radius in my forearm through both of them clean. And it was a 9-month recovery. And after that, my first game back, I broke the exact same two bones again. First game back. And so it was another 9-month recovery period.
Yeah, so you didn't tell me this one, man.
Yeah, no, this hurt. And so that was out for a little bit over a year and a half. And that basically, obviously, it was okay, my dreams are crushed because I already started taking it seriously pretty late. And so after that, it was okay, well, now I have to figure out some other way of channeling that competitiveness. Because once that happened, it started sliding into a darker place because I didn't have a way of being more competitive or being superior. And so then it was
Did you go back to the drugs?
I didn't, because I realized how bad that was for me at that point. But it became literally just laying in bed, just no thoughts, not really knowing what to do, hanging out with people who would just give me a dopamine hit in a sense, not because it made me a better person or anything, but just because more drama would happen. Something would happen that would be a dopamine hit in that moment.
But then this is where at 16 years old, you had that friend send you this, we got to get rich type of reel, right? And that's where it led you into the next part of your journey. So tell me about that.
Yeah. So I started seeing videos and stuff about making money online and et cetera, all that type of jazz. And there's one day when a friend, his name's Alberto, still great friends with him to this day. He's a great guy. He sent me a reel and it was getting rich together with your friends, like what life's going to look like in 3 years or something like that. And then it was like just guys on like yachts and like in Lambos or whatever. He was like, let's get started on Saturday. And I was like, I already started. I already set up a Shopify store. And that was my first intro into the world of drop shipping, where I made no money, but at least I did.
Very nice. So you got into drop shipping, but then a unique insight that you ended up pulling out was the fact that these guys needed websites. And this is where you started targeting these guys for e-com entrepreneurs. And so kind of tell me your journey of how you went from just a classic e-com business, then transitioning into a service-based business.
This is what I think I did really, really well. I have a belief, like, don't do what you're passionate about. Don't do what you love. Do what you're good at. Because so many people, they get caught in like, oh, I love doing this. I enjoy it. But it's like, yeah, but you're not making any fucking money. What's the point? Right? And at that point, when I started drop shipping and all that, I started realizing like, yeah, the website design, I don't necessarily enjoy it. Like, I don't like it, but it's what I'm best at. I can create these artistic designs because naturally I'm a perfectionist. It was very easy.
Why do you think you're good at the drop shipping designs, like those types of websites? Why did you get good at that?
I'm a perfectionist. I'm good at modeling and I'm a perfectionist. If the button was 1 millimeter off, I would spend an hour moving it a little bit until I finally got it in the right place. Like making those very minimalistic changes that create the biggest differences. And that's what makes design very good, is that it's not a concept where you can be holistic. It's not a concept where you can generalize.
But then the product you're ultimately selling was like, okay, it's nice and fun, but you realize that you had to sell now.
Exactly.
Right? And so this is kind of where you got into SMA at 17 years old. Like, tell me about that. What got you in
That's back
initially?
when I was 16 still. But yeah.
16, okay.
Yeah. So from there, I made the transition where it was like, okay, I'm good at websites. You need to get traffic to it. Well, how do you get traffic to it? Through marketing. And so that's when I started learning marketing. And it was like, okay, well, like there's ads, etc. And then that's what takes us to the next story, where my first ever paying for mentoring or a course or whatever, that's when it first was. And there's a guy named Dylan Wilson, right? And I paid $100.
Dilly Willy.
And that's how I initially got into it. And that was the first commitment to myself of like, okay, I'm going to do something serious here. I'm not just doing this for free. I'm not just in my spare time anymore. Like $100 for me back then, that was like $1 million now. And I got it from my parents. I didn't even have it.
Interesting. And what was this coaching about?
It wasn't even coaching. It was literally just a course that was breaking down like marketing and just like basics, fundamentals of SMMA. Like nothing in depth, just superficial stuff.
Was SMA a trend back then? Like marketing agencies?
Yeah, that was like peak trend.
Okay. So in that business or in that course, like he was talking about like just buying ads and then selling to business owners. That was the pretty much model, like the classic agency or SMA model. But then you thought of like something pretty creative where you went to personal trainers and that was your niche because you're an athlete and you did kind of some cool type of service. So tell me about that.
Yeah. So I started realizing it was like, okay, what's my edge? What's my angle? And this is like a big kind of belief I have in any area of life. You always have to find your angle, your edge, any conversation, persuasion, anything. And for me, it was the fact that like I was an athlete and I was still passionate about that. I just couldn't do it. And so it was like, okay, who's going to be my ICP, my ideal client avatar? And it became personal trainers because it was like, I can connect with these people on a personal level to where they feel like I understand them and they understand me. And so what I did is I started taking pictures of like me playing sports, like me playing soccer, like videos, me at tournaments, etc. And I started making Instagram profiles with all these pictures.
Were you still playing soccer back then?
Playing casually, not any hopes or dreams of becoming like professional or anything.
Right, but you still had footage that you could use for the content.
Exactly. And so that's what I would do. And I would structure these profiles to make them think I was an athlete reaching out for personal training help, basically bait and switching them in response.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, wait, I thought they were like faceless accounts, faceless fitness accounts. No, it was like you actually acting as if you're an athlete.
Yeah, no, it was me acting as if I was an athlete, but then I would also post those reels that went viral, which we can go into in a second, on purpose to make it seem like I was good at marketing, but as if it came from a place of my own passion, from what I did.
Smart. I see. Huh, what a smart idea. Okay, so you said that you were going to go into the strategy that you use to make those profiles viral. So then your outreach methods would go really well. So tell us about that, because a lot of people these days, they want clients. Like you guys for copywriters, setters, closers, whatever, you guys want clients. You guys need to nail this outreach strategy. So here's Andreas going to break down some incredible strat that he used. Go for it.
So the thing that pissed me off the most back then was whenever I got DMs of people being like, oh, I can help you grow your social media. And I get them to this day. I can help you grow your social media. You click on their profile and they have 12 followers. It's like, the fuck are we doing? Like, what are we doing? And so it's kind of the same thing where it's like, if you try offering somebody something that you can't even do, or like coaches who are like, I'll get you to 100 grand a month and they've never even touched 10K a month. You know what I mean? And so for me, it was like, how can I give myself proof of concept for these potential clients of like, I know what I'm doing, even if I don't have the clients yet. And so it became a social media thing for me of like, okay, how can I actually go viral at the beginning? Because if I figure that out, not only can I actually provide value, but they'll know I can provide the value. And then the response rates will be higher, close rates will be higher. I can like involve it in my pitch. And so I started figuring out like, okay, what is the strategy to actually going viral? Because I figured out there's people who they can post a video and their first video, they go viral. And there's people who post 1,000 posts and they never do. So it's a formula. There's something behind it. So what I started doing is I made 10 different accounts, all branded as me, all the same pictures, everything. What I started doing is I would clip up footage of like different games, like sports games. I mean, like football, soccer, whatever it was. And I'd try and figure out like, what's the formula? What hook do I need to do? What am I trying to create in the hook? What's the perfect length of the video? What CTAs do I need to have? What needs to happen in the video? What topics? How can I involve external things? Like maybe talking about a rapper, but using like soccer terms to explain it, like whatever it was. And based on that, I'd make a post every single day on all 10 of these accounts to figure out like what's in common, what's the pattern. Because once I figured that out, I literally made one new account. I made 10 posts to see like, okay, how many of them can I get to go viral? And I think it was like 7 of them went viral, like over 100K.
Wow.
A couple of them got
very impressive. So the principle that proof over just saying that you can do it, where you knew that you had to create the actual proof, which then when you approach others with, you know that they'll respond because you have the definitive, undeniable proof. And number 2, also the fact that, hey, volume negates luck. You're testing and testing 10 different accounts. And ultimately, through that, you're able to get the results and you're able to win. I guess with those accounts, then you outreach to these personal trainers. Could you kind of break down like a little mini bit on what your outreach message kind of looked like?
I would have some intro message where it was like, oh, do you offer personal training for athletes specifically? And I would say something like that. And they'd be like, yes. And then I used a bait and switch where it was like, oh, I'm an athlete in XYZ league, blah, blah, blah. I'm connected with a lot of other athletes in the city looking for training services. If you want, I could connect you with them if you give me some kind of like referral commission or something.
That's crazy. That was a year ago and I was still teaching that in my program and it still rips, bro.
Yeah. Exactly.
In my 5-hour course too, I taught that everybody uses that shit. So it makes 100% sense. Okay. So then after you went and did that too for them, you also had a very fantastic service, which kind of was like growth operating back then when nobody was talking about it.
Before it was
right. And just high level guys, growth operating, go to a creator with influencers or with followers, and then you go and monetize their program for them. And so you did that in a very low key back then, like a year ago way. Tell me about it.
Yeah. So I figured out like these people, they would have 100,000 followers and be making like $7,000 a month. Something doesn't add up here. And so I started realizing like their issue wasn't getting attention, because getting attention is very, very easy as like a personal trainer, like a fitness coach. You post a shirtless picture and you go viral. It's not that hard. But what their issue was converting that into dollars. And so I started figuring out like, okay, how can I put together strategies to actually convert these followers into like actual leads and then into clients? And so what I realized is like there was the classic like appointment setting agencies that work for coaches specifically or like other agencies to get them appointments. And I realized, well, why don't I just do that for fitness coaches, personal trainers? They have a lot more attention than a typical agency or an online coach. This brings me back to a very important concept. For me, the definition of innovation is taking 2 concepts that already exist and putting them together into something more powerful. That's how I view innovation. And so I took this one principle of like appointment setting agencies and another principle of like fitness coaches, a different industry, and combine them together.
Because back then people were just doing appointment setting agencies for like dentists or lawyers, just broad, like,
and not even that. Those were only off of ads. Like they would have ads or organic content and then appointments set off of those. The only appointment setting agencies that worked through DMs were agencies that would set appointments for other agencies, which is like the stupidest concept in my mind in the first place.
So you had like setters? Was that what it was?
Yeah.
Like, how did you deliver your service?
I built entire setting teams and I would take them into the DMs of these fitness coaches. We do CTAs on stories of like, oh, if you're looking to lose blah, blah, then DM me this word below, whatever, and have people DM. We do polls of like, what are your fitness goals, X or Y or Z? And if they selected a single one, then the DM setter would go in and DM all those people, right? So the exact same thing. And then also just like people who would comment on a lot of posts, or people would be DMing the influencer, just having the conversations back and forth. And then if they ran out of those leads, they would literally start cold DMing current followers, because those are people who trust the influencer.
And what was your like pricing model? Like, did you go percentage or did you go just rev share?
Yeah. Sometimes it'd be like upfront or like a low retainer plus rev share, but rev share was like how I made.
Right. So percentage of what you made them. And ultimately you got that to how much revenue, how much cash collected with the profit
36K a
share.
month revenue. That was my
Wow.
last month.
36K a month.
Yeah.
Awesome. But then what made it end up kind of fall apart?
I was a high school kid who had 4 hours
Mm,
a day to take meetings. And
mm,
so like eventually being able to manage the appointment setting team, it just wasn't viable because I had so many people. And as you scale, it was like my team couldn't say the same. As I got a new client, great, I have to bring in another 5, 7 appointment setters. And that grows very,
Jesus.
very quickly. And so like me having
Right.
to manage all those people as a 16-year-old kid in high school, like it just wasn't viable. And so eventually it just fell apart.
So for clarity, you're still 16 then,
Yeah,
and or are you 17 around here?
16.
Okay. And what month, what year is this ballpark?
This was March of last year, I believe.
March last year, March 2024. Damn, that's crazy. Yeah,
Pretty
that makes
recent.
sense. Yeah, yeah.
That's not even
Wow,
that.
that's actually really recent. So then you realize that, okay, this business kind of fell apart, but then you had a realization of this natural intuition for sales. Where do you think that came from? Because you talked about how like you felt inferior at school and you're kind of attuned to this level of body language reading. So kind of tell me about that.
I think a lot of people, this is a really common principle. If they grow up in an abusive childhood or whatever it is, they start to pick up on like if they go into a room, they have to immediately read like, oh, what is everybody thinking? What mood are they in? Like, am I under a threat? Am I under attack? Am I safe? And they have to pick up on those very, very little cues instantly. Because if not, they're in danger. And so people learn that. For me, obviously, it wasn't that bad, but like still being in a situation where I had to grow up very alone and like in school, getting made fun of and stuff like that, I had to learn to pick up on those little cues. I go to a lunch table. Is this guy pissed off? Is this guy happy? Is this guy in a good mood? Like I had to pick up on all those little things.
Same.
And a lot of people, they learn that stuff, but they don't actually learn how to utilize it in the real world, which is the weakness. So me being able to realize that, and then I'd go into a sales call for like the old agency, and it would be like, if I asked a question, he had like a little bit of discomfort or like a little bit of nervousness. And it's like, oh, this is clearly a pain point. I got to probe here. And it wasn't even a conscious thing at the beginning. I didn't even know that that's what I was doing, but I could pick up on it. And I'd review that sales
Mm,
call with somebody else, and they'd be like, what the hell are you talking about? And that's when I started
really?
realizing,
People can't tell? Like, I think I gained that skill set too at a young age because you just see like they're kind of tripping out or they're kind of like upset. You know, you could tell by
yeah,
their body language and
there's
very
levels
interesting.
to it though. Most people have no clue. They can't pick up on that.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you gain that skill set. And ultimately, this is where you're brought in with RSC. And what kind of is RSC? And then how did you break into there?
Yeah. Well, RSC was this entire agency before that I was running. I was already like in that program that entire time.
Right.
It
So
was
RSC is
basically,
what and who
yeah.
owns it? And tell me about it a little bit.
Yeah. Dylan Wilson, he's the guy who runs it. It was basically a coaching program for agencies. I'm not going to speak a ton about results or testimonials or anything because I've heard mixed things. At the end of the day, I think about courses and coaching like college. You can go to college, get out of college and still be unemployed or making 30 grand a year, or you can go in and 10 years later be making 500 grand a year.
Yeah,
So
it's
like,
about the
it gives you a
person.
tool, but it's up to you what you do with it.
So you joined that program. That was the $100 course that you bought from Dylan Wilson. And then you went in there as now closer.
Yeah,
Right. So tell me
because
about
I
that.
became good friends with Dylan. And so I was like, yo, I'm out of the agency. I realize I'm good at sales. Like I want to actually take advantage of this and like start to like refine that skill set, have a lot more volume. He was like, yeah, bro, let's do it. So I
Mm,
came in, I started selling. Within my first day, I had already out collected everybody else what they'd collected in like the past week. And then within my first month, I was collecting more than the rest of the team combined. And I tripled everybody else's close rates and cash collection.
wow. Incredible. And so I remember like there's a lot of bad moments here, rough moments where you're like working before school, 4
Yeah.
a.m. team training call, shit like that. So tell me about that.
Yeah, I would wake up 4 a.m. every single day. I would run a team training call. So I started training the team itself within like 2 weeks of being in the company just because my close rates and everything else. So within two
Mm.
weeks, I started training the rest of the team. I had to do it before school because at 6:15 a.m.
Did you get paid extra for that or you just did
No,
it
I did it for free.
because you wanted to prove that you can?
Exactly. I'd get picked up for school at 6:15 a.m. because the guy who would drive me, he had like band before school. So he would have to pick me up earlier.
Right, as like a high school friend that would just drive you?
Yeah, exactly. I would have to do that team training call for the team in the morning from like 4:45 a.m. to like 5:45, and then I'd have to get ready for school, go to school, etc. And then at school, sometimes I'd take follow-up calls. I'd close deals literally at school. I'd just sit alone in the corridor or whatever, doing whatever I could. And then when I got back home, I'd usually get home at like 4:30, and then I'd try and take calls from like 4:30 to like 9 p.m., 10 p.m. and then go to bed, get like 5-6 hours of sleep, do it all over again, 7 days a week.
God, what a pain. And what at the peak did you cash collect in a month there?
I think it was a little over 90 grand.
Nice. And you personally took home how much?
A little bit over 10K, I believe, around there.
Nice. Solid,
I was
solid.
just working week.
What do you think was the number one thing that you learned whilst doing that experience?
I think it was the do whatever the fuck it takes mentality. Like, I think that's really what it was. Because a lot of people...
Did you not have that before?
I did, but it was a different level of it. I think before it was like, because it was during summer when I first started. So I had like the entire day. And so like, oh, if I fuck around here for 30 minutes or an hour, it's like, okay, it is what it is. Like, I have the rest of the day. But here it was like, now I have school, I have all this stuff. Like, I don't have time. Every minute had to be productive. Had to be working towards my goal.
Why do you think you were such a dog whilst you were still in school? Like, what was going on in your mind?
This is another thing not a lot of people know. I never actually enjoyed sales. I was just good at it. And I just had to push myself mentally. Because again, it's about doing what you have to do and what you're good at, not about what you love and your passion.
But then once you get good at it, you end up liking it. So you can't sit here and say that you don't like sales.
I still don't.
Really?
I really don't. I'm really good at it, and I can push myself to do it, and I can make myself do it, but I don't like it. Because once you've gone through that same script 1,000 freaking times and you've written it down 1,000
Do you think that mentality limits you? Where like you're saying, oh, I don't like sales. And so shouldn't you say that you like sales, which then gets you even better?
I don't think so. And the reason why is because me being able to say, I don't want to do this and doing it anyways makes me more powerful. Because most people, they can't even do things that they like to do for an entire day. I can do things I don't want to do for an entire day.
I go about it the other way around. When I say I like it, then I want to do it more. But I'm going to test that too. I like that as well.
I've always done things that I didn't want to do on purpose when I didn't want to do them. Because like there's a part of your brain, the Huberman Lab podcast. I heard about this one time and it made a lot of sense. And he was talking with David Goggins and he said, there's a part of your brain that literally every time you don't want to do something and you do it anyways, that part grows. And that part essentially determines how much will you have.
Yeah, I heard that one. Ooh, I like that. Okay. Then I say I hate everything.
When I can tell myself, I don't want to do this and do it anyways, like that's power. When I would wake up, even living in Arizona, working at 7th level, which I'm sure we'll go into a little bit later. When I could do that and wake up at 4:30, 5 a.m. every single day, cold plunge immediately, literally time it, be in the cold plunge within 90 seconds of waking up, even though it was freezing outside and I did not want to do it, willpower. Yep. That's it.
I like that. I add also like the layer of I identify with this. I don't give a shit if I like it or not. It's just my identity that I wake up at a certain time.
Yeah. And
then I think layering both of those, it just crushes it.
That's powerful.
Okay. Interesting. So then you go from the closing where you hated closing to then still hating closing, but much better at it, to then getting into something that you hate even more, which is working over at Matt Shields and doing hella outbound dials and just dogging it with Tony Lee, who we're also going to interview really soon. I should check that out as well. But kind of tell me about that and how that story transpired there.
Yeah, that was like the next continuation of just doing what it takes. So we came on with Matt Shields and it was like, yeah.
And who's Matt Shields?
Matt Shields, he agency coach basically. Now he's shifted entirely and like very faith driven and everything. I think he's a great guy.
Faith driven angle. That one's popping these days, guys. The Muslim Christian angle is ripping. So continue though.
But now he was like an agency coach and all of his followers knew him for the fact that he gave away value for free. And we were trying to go to those same followers who followed him because he gave value for free and trying to pay money.
That shit's a bitch. I know about it.
Exactly. And so like he built this entire school group, complete free, everything. All these people were like, hail Matt Shields, we don't have to pay $1. And then we're going in there trying to convince them that they have to pay a lot more than $1 now. That was the next continuation. And so I did that with Tony. I mean, it was the same thing. It was like we had access to the DMs. We had people's phone numbers.
And who's Tony? How do you know him?
I met him because I actually paid him for agency coaching, $5,000. Yeah, this is actually funny. He never actually gave me the coaching that he was supposed to, but I still love him. He connected me with Yash though, which is how I ended up going into 7th level.
So it's worth it.
I still love Tony. I got all the value out of it.
Did you get a refund?
No, I didn't. It's
That's crazy.
I love Tony. I would never even ask him.
And just so you know, like Tony is also an agency owner who like popped off in this SMA space that I guess all of us kind of come from. But so you and Tony were kind of like growth operators for Matt Shields, right? So tell me how you did that launch and that whole process.
Yeah, it was really like, guys, we have phone numbers, we have people's DMs, we have emails, go make money. That was it. And then me and Tony came in and we had to build structures. And so like I built the sales scripts myself. Like we brought in 2 setters underneath us. There's one other closer. And then it was like, what scripts can we have? What's the setting process? What do we send people like pre-call? What do we do after they buy? Hosting the coaching calls even. Like I even got involved with that. I was doing coaching calls myself.
Wow, fulfillment. That's crazy.
It was like A to Z basically running the business. And so like that was really fun because again, it was just like figure it out. You got leads, you got to make sales. And our first 30 days, we did $120,000 collected in pre-sales. We hadn't even launched. We didn't even have an offer. It was just pitching people like, okay, you're going to get coaching basically.
That whole thing was a crazy story. I heard about it more from Tony.
Exactly.
And we're not going to go too deep into it here, but like on the Tony podcast, guys, probably going to come out like next week or so. You guys should definitely check that out. Get ready for that. And if there's a week past, then congratulations. You just click off into my channel and you can go see it. That was a banging story. And I guess we'll talk about the bigger offer on that Tony podcast that you guys should go watch. If you want to be reminded, then make sure to subscribe. But at a high level on the sales element, on what you actually did, right? What did that look like? And what was the top key number one lesson that you learned throughout that sales experience?
Number one lesson, I think, was training reps is the biggest thing that I got out of that.
Because before you didn't do that? Like with RSC Dillon, did you or did you not?
I did, but it was taking people who were already in sales or who had already been in sales for a while and making them better. Versus here is taking people who like had never been in sales or like very new, definitely not coaching sales or high ticket, and getting them good very, very quickly.
So what's the one lesson that you learned from there that everyone watching here who wants to be like you, who wants to be able to train these salespeople can take away?
Process over everything, 1,000%. Everybody focuses on NLP or psychology, the things that sound good, that seem complicated. 90% of the results you get come from your process, your framework, your structure. Because at the beginning, it was training of like, oh, there's this psychology tip or like this little thing you can do here, do here. It sounds cool. And it might inflate your sales 5%. It doesn't get you from a 1 out of 10 to a 9 out of 10. It just doesn't. The biggest thing was creating scripts, frameworks that were extremely effective, and then having them write it every single day, role-playing it every single day, just doing the same thing over and over again. The boring shit so many times until they mastered it. That was the biggest lesson I took away.
I'm curious about this, bro. Do you teach them why the script works, or it's just like do the fucking thing?
Not at the beginning. At the beginning, it's just do the fucking thing. And then eventually it's why it works. And that's the next level of progression. So the way I think about it is it's like you have a process. Then it's like, why does this process work? Why are you asking the questions? And then it's adding the stuff on top of it. The nuances, the tonality, the stuttering on purpose, the pausing, all that.
That's a good mental model. Volume, and then why it works, and then the actual high level.
Exactly.
Getting fancy with it, with the tonality.
I think
Someone's
about it like what,
that.
why, and how. That's how I think about it.
Cool. Okay. So I guess that lesson as well. What was one huge mistake that you wish you would have done differently when you were going and doing this Matt's Shields launch? That if you did it this time, you would go and redo it with this way?
Yeah. I think it was just having a deeper understanding of efficiency. The mental model was like, oh, these leads don't want to pay any money. So if we can find somebody who wants to pay a little bit of money, then have a 2-hour sales call with them and guarantee that they close. And so like my close rates were insanely high, like unheard of in the industry, like 92%. But the calls were that long, so there wasn't efficiency. So the biggest thing I would take away that I do very differently now is like now I'll have sales calls start to finish, 30 minutes, 7,800 PIF, 10K PIF, whatever it is.
How did you get 92%? Did you just not take calls with shitty leads?
No. I took calls with shitty leads with everybody. Half my sales.
Then how did you get 92?
Half my sales were taking out loans, borrowing it from people, like deposits, and then following up with them every single week, making financial strategies with them as if I was like a financial advisor or something to help them save up the money so they could join. Like it was
right. But the takeaway that you're saying there is that instead of those 2-hour long things, you need to compress it down into the 30 minutes.
Because realistically, like if instead of spending 2 hours to get a deposit and then building a financial strategy with this guy so he could save up a little bit of money for a payment plan over the next month. If
you just cut the lead?
That was like 4 hours of my time. If instead of that, I just cut it and I just outbounded for 4 hours and sent myself sales calls, I could have gone another 7K PIF.
So your paradigm is like, don't try to sit there and bug the lead that you have now, get more leads, which then have the money. Actually, there's no need for financial strategizing because they already have the money.
There's no point. Yeah, exactly. And if you're
it's
good
like a time
at 30-minute window, you can get them so bought in, so committed that they'll be texting you a week or a month later. There's even a guy, this happened like 2 or 3 weeks ago. He texts me and he's like, dude, I've been door knocking the last 5 days to get a little bit of cash. I have XYZ amount. Like, can I join on like a payment plan or something?
Door knocking's crazy.
Yeah, you went door knocking.
So your idea is just sell 30 minutes, move on. I'd never thought about it like that.
Yeah, efficiency.
Cool. Okay. So then you learned that efficiency lesson, or most likely probably rethought and learned that efficiency lesson once you went ahead and moved into 7th level.
Yep.
And this is where you just smashed it the first month. But kind of tell me the journey on how you got into this company and where it sort of began. And then also tell me the bloody first months in Bali where you're working overnight shifts.
Yeah. So at the very beginning, first month in the company, I was in Bali. So I was working overnights. I'd wake up.
But before, how did you get in?
How did I get in? So Yash, he was the guy who sold me an event ticket to go to a 7th level event in the past.
Who's Yash and what was he doing before?
Yeah, Yash, savage, best friend. He's like family. He made $100K a month in straight commissions working at 7th level. He was the VP of revenue for the entire company, like everything. And he did that when he was 18 years old. And so he's a savage. Yeah.
You're talking about Jerry Minor, 7th level.
Yeah.
Jerry Minor, with the top salespeople that I talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Was over
2.5
million
commissions when he was like 16 years old, 15 years old. Like, he is a savage.
Wow. Incredible. And at the peak, like, what did their company do?
What did 7th level do? I think, like, you brought it up last time, I think 3.5, 3.7 million a month.
3.7. Yeah. Crazy high numbers. So I guess Yash was working there and already, was he already the CRO? Like, was he?
No, he wasn't. He basically was, but without the title. He was like the guy who, like, whenever something was needed, he would get it done. So people from marketing would go to him like, oh, like, what do we do here? How do we like script out this email or build this strategy or whatever? Whenever there was a new division in the company, like, oh, we need to sell this event. He would sell all the tickets. B2B, he would figure it out. Like, he was the guy who would go into a division, figure it out, and just make stuff happen.
Interesting. And so then he brought you on, and kind of how did that relationship get built? Sorry, I cut you off on the him selling you event ticket part.
Yeah. So he sold me an event ticket and he was like, I want to build this team, impact revenue. I want to build a team within 7th level that does that officially, who goes into new divisions of the company, builds out an entire sales process, performs, documents it all, and then brings in other reps behind to continue it. And he was like, I want you on that team.
You called like the Avengers of the sales.
Yeah, like the Avengers at 7th level. Go in there and make money. That was the job. So that's how I came into it. And I came into it with 2 other buddies that I got on the team. Connor Trong, you might know him, and Matthew Pham. And so we went in. My first month in the company, I was in Bali. And so I was working overnights. I'd wake up around 8:30 p.m., 9 p.m. every day. And I'd work from like 8:30 p.m. all the way to like 11 a.m. And I'd remember because our end of day meeting would end at 11 a.m. And I'd have to sprint to the restaurant downstairs to get food before they closed for breakfast because they had like a little buffet at the resort or whatever. And then I'd spend like 1 or 2 hours with my family, go to bed, do it all over again. That was my schedule for an entire month.
Wait, you were hanging out with your family for a month?
Yeah, but not really hanging out.
They're all in Bali together for a month?
Yeah, they're all in Bali with me, but I just literally couldn't spend time with them.
Why a whole month? Don't they have like work job?
Yeah, it was during the summer, and my dad, he has a really interesting job, which kind of lets him like travel around the world and stuff because he does like research. And so he was doing a collaboration with a university in Bali with like one of their dance.
Oh, that makes sense. What a great excuse.
Yeah.
Okay. So then you went from Bali, then back home, and then you had some sort of unique insight here where you're talking about how high ticket sales, it just feels like it's not real. You know, kind of like Play-Doh, you're molding reality. So tell me what you were doing, which felt like molding reality.
Yeah, dude. High ticket sales is such an interesting thing because it's like, it's literally like pulling money out of thin air. It doesn't make sense. Like anybody who's been in high ticket, I think you've felt that way before. It's like you just throw up a video, somebody gives you their phone number, and then you just get like $10,000 out of them. It doesn't make sense. And so like I realized like I want to develop stronger skills to be able to do this, not just in high ticket sales, but outside of it, just like in the real world as a whole. And so that's when coming back to the States, and this goes into another funny story where this is one for the ages. Yash told me, he was like, I need you to move to Arizona. And I was like, okay. I told my parents, I was like, I'm just going to go visit for like 5 days. And I get a one-way ticket to Arizona. And as I'm leaving the door, I'm going out the front door. My mom, she pulls on me and I'm like, what? And she's like, oh, like when are you coming back? Like when do you have your return ticket for? And I was like, oh, I'm not too sure. I'll check like on the Uber and all that. And I didn't see them for like 3 months after that.
And was it the first time that you actually left home? Like you actually moved out?
Yeah. First time I moved out.
So it must have been huge. It was like the big exodus moment.
Because they told me I couldn't move out. Like they literally told me that. And so I literally had to do that.
You should have started with that.
Yeah. And in my first week, I got a lease, I got a dog. And the reason why this was genius is because I could tell them if they were like, oh, Andres, you need to come back, whatever. It's like, you're just going to let the dog die. What is he going to do?
Okay. So then you went there and you connected with Jerry Minor. In your first month, you did like 300 cash collected. Was it first month or no?
No, that my first month, I think I did like around 100,000 or something like that. It was like a little bit of a slower start, but the reason why it was because we were doing different revenue strategies and stuff. So we weren't focused on like collecting cash. We were focused on building strategies and like developing different divisions. It was the purpose for the first couple of weeks and months.
Yeah. So then once you moved from there to Arizona, this is where the whole 7th level story began. But before that, we got to get a full under, and eventually what we're going to talk about is you going into there, collecting 300K in your best month, transferring several departments, taking over the entire DM department, and ultimately like a lot of the insights that you learn from there on event ticket sales, B2B sales as well, and all the interesting things. But I think first you have to get a high level view at what the 7th level business even looks like, right? So do you mind if you break down their offers, their marketing, their sales, their revenue strats as well? We could get kind of like a little inside peek.
Yeah, so at a high level,
3.7.
Three core offerings. There's a course, group coaching, and group coaching plus one-on-one plus the course. Those like the three kind of at a high level.
Damn, bro, I went into it. So the core offer you see is like 2.0, 3.0, inner circle. How much are each one of them?
2.0 is 4K, 3.0 is like 10K if they haven't changed anything, and inner circle is 16 grand.
Interesting. And you also had like a B2B division where it was like a few 700,000 a month that you guys were doing from it. Kind of break that down too.
Yeah, so that's very like niche offerings. It's not like a one size fits all. Like at a restaurant, you can like order different plates and stuff. It's very similar in terms of like you get a scripting session with Jeremy, or you could get like this team training, or like have somebody fly down. Like there's all these different offerings, and you can pick and choose like which ones you want, essentially.
Interesting.
That's how it works. Yeah.
And you guys had some really cool clients. Can you tell me about those?
Yeah, like ExxonMobil was a client, Google was a client, Google AdWorks, like couple of big.
Pretty sick. So there's one area, which is the core offer. There's the B2B division area. And there's also the events area. You said that one, you collect like 750K per event and you do like 3 times a year. Tell me about a high level there. I
don't know about since I left because I've heard it's changed. But I know before then, the last event we ran before that, we did about $750,000 collected. Yash and me and a lot of you guys might know him, John Mao, because we all work together. That's for all the people commenting that I sound like John.
Oh, you got that as well? Yeah. And also, guys, Yash and John, they're going to be on the pod too. So look out for that. But anyway, continue.
Yeah. So we did the event tickets. We sold that entire event out like ourselves. Other reps would sell like a couple. We would sell like 90% of the entire room for like every event. And then at the event, there was like the upsells and everything. We'd still make the majority of the sales. And then it was collecting about like 700,000 per event, essentially.
Lovely. And they were like live events.
Yeah. Live events in person, 100 people.
Interesting. Wow. So these are those 3 departments. Could you kind of break down from that, let's say if it's 3 mil that you guys were doing each month, how much core did, how much B2B did, and then how much events did? Like a pie chart.
Yeah. B2B did like a couple $100,000 a month. Events, whenever there was an event, then obviously that month would be higher because it'd collect 700,000, 750. B2C would obviously be the rest of that money. And then split between B2C, there'd be upsells and regular cash as well.
Interesting. Oh, this is like because there's back-end offers as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe it'll be like 70, 0, 30, or no, maybe like on a shit month or without the events. And then on a good month, it's like 60, maybe 30 events because events just crush it.
Exactly. Around there.
Interesting. Okay. So going from there, there's the marketing end on the team structure that you guys had, the different traffic sources that you had, and also like the high level of the funnels. Could you break that down for us? I remember the first part was a team structure. There's like a CMO, copywriters, like kind of break that whole structure.
Yeah. So marketing structure, there was a CMO. Under the CMO, there would be directors of marketing. So like there would be like director of graphics or paid advertising content. And then underneath each one of those, they would have their separate teams, which would be more like kind of like paid labor, whether it's like editors, videographers, graphic designers, like stuff like that. That was the marketing team structure.
And then what about the traffic sources?
Traffic sources, it was a split between paid and organic on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, a little bit of LinkedIn, but not really. And then a little bit of Twitter, but also not really. The main traffic sources would be organic, like regular videos. And then the most common funnel was the Black Book funnel. So it was basically, it's an SLO, typical SLO. So it's a $27 book with upsells within the funnel, going all the way up to, I think, 127, I think was the maximum price with all the upsells. And it literally just served as a self-liquidating offer. The cost to acquire a customer was the same as what the customer was spending. That way it was like free advertising, free leads, and then they could easily be upsold in like a 2.0, 3.0 inner circle. That was the idea of it.
Interesting. Did you have like webinars or events? I mean,
Yes.
you already had the event. What about like
Yeah.
webinars online?
So this is interesting. So the Black Book leads, after a Black Book came in, they would have an option to book an implementation call, which was a little bit of coaching, a little bit of helping them, but then you'd basically pitch them to get onto a sales call at the end. And so the people went onto a sales call, then obviously they would go on and close. The people who didn't go into a sales call, they would be like one lead list within the CRM. And the people who didn't book an implementation call in the first place, they would be a separate bucket. They had about a 50% booking rate. And so the other 50%, that's a lot of leads who are buying the book but not booking. And so they would have a challenge or like some kind of webinar or whatever every couple of weeks, every couple of months, and redirect all the people who bought the Black Book but did not book an implementation call onto that webinar or challenge.
Oh, interesting. So just high level for you guys listening, it's like the SLO, which is self-liquidating offer. They buy the book, they buy the cheap thing, and then the ads pay for it. And then the leads that don't book, they go into a webinar. The leads that do book, they get closed by the team.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Exactly.
And who would present on the webinar? Was it Jeremy?
Jeremy himself. Jeremy and Anthony Vasari. I love Anthony.
Live?
Yeah, live.
Every time, every month.
Yeah, every time. Not every month,
Sheesh.
but every like 2 to 3 months, typically.
Got it. Huh. How many people would you show up on that webinar?
Dude, those would be big. So there was like mini master classes, and then there would be like actual challenges, and they were 5-day challenges. The master classes weren't as big, probably like 1,000 people or something like that, or like 500. But then the challenges, I think they would be up to like 30,000 registrants or something like that. It's like big.
How many shows?
I don't want to say numbers that aren't accurate, but if I had to guess, I think it was around like 10,000, between 5 and 10,000.
5 to 1,000. Damn. That's good.
I can drop some sauce on webinars if you want, on masterclasses.
Oh, we will maybe do that later. All right. So going from the marketing components on the actual company, then into sales, right? And the whole team structure there. Could you break down the leadership structure and the setting team, the closing teams, just at a high level view, especially with starting with leadership, right? You said Yash was, things like that.
Yeah. So I'll start with leadership. So there was VP of revenue, which was Yash. He was doing team training and stuff alongside me. So like it was training the teams, managing, etc. Then there was another guy, we'll just call him Jay for purposes. And he was more data driven. Like, so data kind of management, going through the reps is like numbers, like, okay, who needs to improve on what, etc. There was the president of the company, Sean, who was more so like motivational stuff, just kind of like keeping the vibe up, the culture, if you will. And then there was the sales team. So in the sales team, there's 3 components. There was a outbound setting team, there was an implementation team, and there was a closing team. And then in that, if you break it down a little bit more, the closing team, there was an upsell team, and then there was front end team. It's kind of basic structure.
I see. Wait, what did you say was upsell and back end team? You're talking about the setting team, correct?
Upsells and front end. So there was a team. So there's 2 guys, JP and Paul. Again, love them. They're the ones who do like basically only back end. Basically only upsells.
Wait, just to get this clear, at least I have on here 10 outbound setters. These are the ones outbounding and dialing on SMS. And then, that there's like 4 DM setters in the actual IG, 5 implementation coaches who are doing triages. So that's the back end is what you're saying.
Yeah.
I see. So 10 outbound on front end, 5 on the back end, and then 4 on the IG. So it's like split like that.
Yeah. And even if split the closing team itself, there's people who only do upsells, and then there's people who do baseline. So front end sales, which would be like getting people who aren't clients to become clients.
Interesting. Oh, so there is a split team on the closers too.
Exactly.
Like some of them, they'll do front end sales, some of them they'll do back end sales.
Exactly.
And then they got 3.5 base plus 4% commission, and then 14% on the closers.
Yeah. I'm not sure where you heard that, but yeah, around there.
Yeah. Oh, fair enough. Okay, then what was the impact revenue team and how that kind of worked?
Yeah, so literally the entire purpose, we would go into a new division.
And you're welcome, guys. For those of you who are more high level, you wouldn't want those numbers. Okay, so continue.
Yeah, we would go into a different division in the company, figure it out, build it out, and then bring in other reps, other people after us to basically take over the processes that we'd already built. So we did that in B2B. We did it in even just regular B2C sales, like front end sales. We built the indoctrination process, confirmation process, all that stuff. We did it with the event tickets, like I said earlier.
So wait, so how many were on that Avengers team?
It was me, John Mao, Connor, Matthew, and Yash, and Kevin Pham. So it was 6. And then towards the end, it was just me, Yash, and Kevin.
Got it. So you go in, build, validate, exit. Go in, build, validate, exit, like that.
Yeah, it was like leverage within a company in a sense.
Interesting. What was comp for that team, if you don't mind me asking?
It was regular commissions. However, regular commissions was undefined because it was a new division. And so we would kind of be able to not make it whatever we wanted, obviously, but like there would be different kind of structures.
Give me 50%.
Yeah, like even when
you guys are basically like growth operators almost.
Yeah, literally. That's what helps so much with the consulting that we're doing now is that there was no like planned structure. We could create it in the moment, which now we're able to do that again, but at scale.
Interesting. So you go into those different departments, you say like, hey, I want these amount of commissions for these sales that I'm doing. Do you get like recurring commissions after you leave the department?
Well, it depends what kind of offer it was. If it was just a front end offer, then no. But if it was a recurring offer, then yeah, of course.
What was in the comp that made it so that you were like, holy crap, I really want to go and put the effort to build something incredible?
It wasn't really that. The reason why I even got into like something in the first place, rather than just staying in the high ticket industry, it was because like I wanted to learn and develop. Because if I'd never done that, I wouldn't be able to do what we do now. I just wouldn't.
Right.
I wouldn't know
just the environment for the ability to build and create new systems and then go and execute upon those was what you found valuable.
Because I wouldn't know how to go into a business or a different division and figure out like what's needed and then build out processes and then be able to scale it. I wouldn't know how to do that if it wasn't.
Okay. So then overall, with the company size, it was 120 total, correct? Interesting. Okay. So then I kind of want to go into like specific rev strats that you ended up going in as that Avengers team and you developed, which I think tons of people can generate insights from there on like how they should go about and do this themselves. If they're sales agency, closer, setter.
This can be implemented into any business, by the way. So if you guys are listening, like any business you run, high ticket, whatever, even if you're only doing 50, 100 grand a month, the exact same strategies. And that's what we do now.
Okay. So the first end was upsell optimizations where you went in and you did something interesting. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So a couple different strategies for upsells. The kind of main one is we would build workflows, right? Where it would be like targeting current clients, whether it was a 2.0 client, 3.0 inner circle, even black book sometimes. And then we'd build out a workflow where like basically the kind of general framework was baiting them onto a coaching call. And so it was like, for example, and we'd always use an angle, a frame. This is what I was talking about earlier. So I'll give you an example. We made a change to the coaching within the 3.0. And so we sent out a workflow basically being like, hey guys, we just changed the structure of the 3.0. So if you want to see how to get the most out of it, you can book a free coaching call here.
And you would do it inside the 2.0 community.
Inside the 3.0, because that one was specific for the 3.0, but we would do that for everybody. And we would do it through the CRM. So we literally send it as a text and email to all the leads in that program.
Oh, because you guys didn't have a community, correct?
We did have a community, but like it wouldn't get the same response rates if we did it through the community. And we tried that.
So you rather did SMS blasts.
Exactly.
Okay. And then you went in there and what did you exactly, like what did the process look like? Just at a high level, not like too detailed.
You mean on the coaching call or generally?
Right. So the positioning of the call was saying, hey, you guys should come on this call because you want to get free coaching.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And then what did you do when you brought those guys on the call?
So,
so basically like the idea is like, you guys, this Avengers team, go make more money with existing leads. Like go and do something. Okay. So tell me about that.
How do you make more money with those extra leads so that other people can do the same thing after us?
Got it. That's actually very entrepreneurial, which makes this such a good role to learn from. But yeah, tell me, continue.
So going into like how we did the coaching calls, the structure basically is at the beginning, it's like, okay, what do you want to work on, man? We have 30 minutes here. You do whatever you want. It's like, oh, blah, blah, whatever problem, you get like some surface level issue, and then you make them role play it out. Because then when you role play it, then they basically like, they feel awkward, they feel nervous, they feel unconfident. And then it's like, man, like, is that really NEPQ? Like,
man, you suck. Holy fuck.
Basically. It's basically what you're doing. And so it literally just be like, is that really like, where do you learn that from? And then they always sound like hesitant. You're just seeding doubt. And then from there, you extrapolate whatever problem it was. For example, if they had bad tonality, then it's like you sounding nervous, like what do you feel like that would trigger, I guess, like in the prospect's mind though? What would make them feel like less confident in me? It's like, okay, and what do you think would happen when you actually pitch them at that point? Well, like they would give a think about it objection because they feel fear or whatever it is, right? And so then it'd be seeding doubt, and then you go and do a pitch, right? And the pitch would be offering a sales call. It's like a potential hire program. It's kind of how it works.
Oh, so the triage is how long were they? They're like 30 minutes?
30 minutes for the coaching calls.
Got it. So you send a 30-minute into the hire or into the main sales call.
Exactly.
Ah, interesting. So it's getting the permission to now actually sell them.
Exactly. Without actually putting a price, because as soon as you put a price, the resistance like way higher. But if you're just like, will you be potentially open?
Why didn't you just close on that call?
The resistance would be too high. Whenever you get them to agree to like, I'm open to something, and then you give them 24 hours to like marinate in the thought that they're open to buying more. When they get on the call, they're already like, they know what's up.
Right. Versus like the frame of just a setter call right into like a close is just too aggressive.
Exactly. It feels too abrupt for them. And so you get a lot of competitor fear objections.
Got it. Okay. That's a very smart strat. And a lot of you guys should yoink that for upsells. Then another thing was like the actual offer improvement of the back end. And you talked about how you studied Tony Robbins' ecosystem of cross-selling events. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So we started realizing like, how can we get upsell ratios higher? And the difference, I think, is like at 7th level, it was a lot of like trying to push somebody to upsell, right? Which the upsell would help them. Like it would definitely help them. But it was like trying to get them to do it versus the people coming to you like, oh, I want to upsell, which is a really, really big difference in a business and the reputation, everything else, right? And so what Yash and I kind of started trying to figure out like before we left the company was like, how can we make it so that people want to upsell? How can we position VSLs and position the programs and change the structure of the programs and the CX and everything else to make them want to upsell, to be excited for it? And through there is where we started studying like a lot of the big players in the coaching industry specifically, which was like Tony Robbins or like Grant Cardone, people like that, right? And then learning a lot from like, how do they position it? What's their angle? How do they use the mindset, et cetera? So we even went to like a Tony Robbins event, et cetera, December.
Live.
Yeah, literally. And it was the date with Destiny. So it was like, I don't know, like $7,000 a ticket or whatever it is.
Okay. So continue. What did you find out with digging into those insights and what did you generate?
I think the biggest difference was constant positioning of the next step that they're going to take and using a different angle for everything. So like, I'll give you an example with Tony Robbins. If you look at one of like his business mastery or whatever, the positioning is very different than if you look at for the platinum program, which is one that's like $80,000 or $85,000. It's extremely different positioning. Because the $85,000, it's targeting like entrepreneurs who have some kind of issue with them that they want to resolve. And it's talking about like traveling the world and like going to all these different cool exotic places and meeting all these top entrepreneurs and name dropping all those people and talking about more technical stuff of a business.
So the actual pitch of it was the desired result was much more like aggressive.
This is even a sales concept. Like if you're taking somebody through their ideal dream, like what they want, to like build that gap. And you have somebody who is making $2,000 a month, who's completely broke, and you get him to say, oh, I want to become a multimillionaire. He's not going to feel the impact of him saying that because the person making $2,000 a month is worried about paying his bills next week on a day-to-day basis. So what you're
not thinking about.
Exactly.
Yeah. They're not thinking about going to F1 or some shit.
Exactly. So what you're after like that, and this is more like sales specific stuff, but somebody who's dead broke, not making any money, their outcome that they're going to feel the most is having safety and security. For somebody who's already a millionaire, the outcome they're going to feel the most is like the legacy, the impact.
So you have to say the right things to the right people. Exactly. But I guess then you learn that insight and then you actually brought it to tacticality in something that you did inside of Jeremy Minor. So could you tell me about what you did, what you built that ultimately brought that idea of targeting different avatars with the pitches then into what you tactically did?
Yeah. And I honestly wish we'd had more time to figure this out more because I thought like, I think we could have done massive stuff for that. But even the conversion rates we saw as soon as we implemented it were a lot better. So for example, like doing the 2.0 or 3.0 inner circle, positioning specifically to those people, meaning like a revenue strategy that I put together is we would go to everybody in the CRM who was a business owner, for example, right? And then send a workflow.
Segmentation.
Exactly. Because it was no longer about 2.0, 3.0 inner circle, but it was like, if they're a business owner, you can speak to them very differently than somebody who's a sales rep. That's one random example. Other ones was like building VSLs specifically targeting like certain avatars and audiences and getting Jeremy even to like speak differently in different types of videos or different VSLs, even like in his tonality and everything else. Obviously he's a master of it. So getting him to like speak a little bit differently or different pacing or like using more personal stories, for example, of like his childhood or his youth or his early days when he was talking to somebody who wasn't making a lot of money, for example, in the 2.0 or who got the legacy. That's another example.
Right.
Downsell for 2.0 where it like doesn't cost like almost anything, very, very cheap. And nobody would be sold it unless they actually couldn't afford the 2.0. So if you send a workflow out to those people, the way you speak is like, I know you're not making a lot of money. I know you're going through tough times, etc. Versus you're not going to send that to somebody in the inner circle. That's the difference.
And how you would send that content was through making like a different landing page and you put Jeremy's videos on there and you boom, you send it to them.
Exactly. Landing page, SMS, email, there would be a mix. The thing we saw that responded the best was when we would send an SMS saying like, oh, Jeremy made a video about X and Y and Z. Do you want to see it? Do you want me to send it over? And make them reply yes and then send it. Because something about it psychologically, having the two-way conversation would make them engage a lot more.
Right. That permission marketing.
Exactly.
Okay. Very interesting. So now that you had these incredible different systems that you implemented into Jeremy's business, which honestly are really great ideas that you guys should steal right here. The thing is, it kind of, the business, right? It's at 3.5 million, but it's at 3.5 million. You know what I mean? It's stuck there, kind of not there, right? So what are some areas where such a gigantic titan like this in the industry is still having struggles where they feel like, oh man, I wish I could grow in this area. I wish I could grow in this area. And things that you feel like ultimately led to the position where you're like, I don't feel like, the company is so great. I still love Jeremy. Like, I don't feel like I have personally the level of growth that I can. And the first point that I remember you talking about was the ROAS as you kept growing and how it decreased a little bit, just at a high level. You don't get too nitty gritty.
Yeah.
But tell me about that.
I'll go into it at a high level. So if you do logistics of a business, like a coaching business specifically, that's around like 3 mil a month, for example, trying to get them to like 10 mil a month. If you look at the actual numbers of it, it's like almost impossible. Because if you do the math, the amount of sales calls that would have to be taken with a certain conversion rate, and I'm going to say numbers right now, these might not be exact, but this is kind of like what I remember it being estimated. It would have to be something like 5% of every salesperson in the entire USA would have to be a client of 7th level, spending like an average of at least $3,000 for them to reach like 9 figures.
Yeah, because the avatar was salespeople only that Jeremy would target.
And the way that it was structured, the business. Because getting there would be possible, but not with a high profitability marker. That wouldn't be. Because the amount of sales reps you would have to take enough calls to be able to actually afford that and get to those numbers, that's like not viable. So I think the biggest things I kind of took away from it is like, you have to prioritize loyalty over most other character traits. Because like, for example, Yash and I, we were the most loyal people to that company. Like Yash was there for 5 years through thick and thin, all kinds of stuff happening to him. Same here, like the amount of hours I was able to work at the company, nobody else is working that. Not the CEO, not the president, nobody. Nobody was working as hard as Yash and I. And anybody in the company will tell you that. So like prioritizing loyalty, because if that had been their priority, me and Yash probably would have stayed. It's realistic.
Okay, but what do they prioritize?
This will sound in a bad way. I don't mean it in a bad way. Control, I think, was a big aspect of it. It was very much focused towards like, how can we get everybody to do the same thing over and over again, which I don't think necessarily works in a business if you're trying to have S players.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I don't know if it's Jeremy's fault or whoever's fault was their managerial style was like trying to just get people to keep doing the same thing like a cog in the machine.
Exactly.
Oh, they went like industrial management mode, huh?
Exactly.
Like back in the Industrial Revolution.
Essentially. And so the issue with that is that like a lot of your actual S players, like B players, A players, they'll stay.
They want to do that. They just want to be lazy fucks, just press a bunch of buttons. But
and not even lazy, but they don't want to have to think. They don't want to have to make new stuff. They don't want to be at risk. They want to have a higher base and a lower commission and just be able to relax and do their thing.
Screw that.
An S player doesn't want to have a base. They want to have complete control over what they do. They want to be able to build new stuff. They want to be able to grow. And as soon as you take that away, those people leave your company.
So I guess that was the managerial ideal as well. I didn't get that insight.
Yeah.
Interesting. So now for the rapid fire round, I think there's some interesting things that we could talk about here. What do you think in sales is a commonly accepted truth that you believe is incredibly wrong?
Rely on close rate. I think having close rate as a metric that you care about, I think is super stupid in every regard. Because the biggest thing I see in the industry is so many closers, they'll prioritize increasing their close rate, not their cash collection.
Interesting. Why do you think that happens?
Because it's a number that's easy to track and you can't blame on anybody else. So like if you look at cash collection, a sales rep can always blame, oh, the marketing was worse or the leads weren't qualified. Close rate, you can't do that. So like I used to even prioritize close rate. It was like, oh, like the 92% close rate, for example, great example. I was focused on close rate, so I wanted to get to 92%. I wasn't focused on the cash.
Okay, when that incorrect focus occurs, what is the output causation of that? What happens that's a bad thing that you don't want ultimately for the company's growth?
Lower conversion from lead to sale is the biggest one.
What would a sales rep behaviorally do when that type of issue happens?
They'll block out different times in their calendar, like in between calls. They will make less dials, like talk to less new people and focus more on older leads. They'll have much longer calls. So they'll have like calls that are like an hour and a half, which just isn't necessary.
To make sure they close. And they'll close for like $2 instead of the whole package.
Exactly. Lower ticket.
So how should a business owner comp their sales team? Like what should they say, hey, put this on the leaderboard so that they get the sales reps to actually do the things that they want them to do?
That's the only thing. I wouldn't even show the rest of the team what the close rates are for the other reps. I wouldn't even make that like a known stat because then people will start to prioritize it naturally. If the only thing people see is the cash collection of the other reps, then that'll be like what they move towards. And so like the metric, going back to what you were saying earlier, the metric I think that's very important is like average cash collected per call and average cash collected per lead. I think are the kind of the biggest indicators.
Measure the cash collected per call and cash collected per lead. Exactly. I like that. Okay. And another thing that I remember you talking about here was that sales reps often try to master all these multiple different scripts when in reality, there is something that you said that I thought was very smart. So go for it.
I think trying to add all these new things to scripts and trying to make too many changes and trying to add very nuanced stuff like NLP and stuff like that I was talking about earlier, I think that makes a 5% jump. But the biggest issue is like if you think about it in terms of stacking, person who uses a decent script but masters it will always be more effective than the person with the best script who just knows it.
Why do you think that is?
Because it gives you a sense of like being able to be natural enough on a call. And once you understand the principles, it's what I was saying earlier. It's the what, why, how. You have the what, which is the script, the why, which is why you're asking it.
Oh, they layer together. I like that.
Which is the nuance of like the tonality and the intentional stuttering and all that stuff. And once you go from a what to a why, that's a different level. The performance from a what to a why will increase.
But then the sales reps, they just stay at the what. They just keep trying to add new things to what, creating new little things. Like, no, brother, you got to understand base what it is. And then you got to get to the why. Stop staying at this level.
Yeah, because you could give me any script right now, but since I already understand the why, like even if it's a terrible script, if there's a single question about pain or problems or anything, I'll know right there to keep probing and how to get deeper and the right tonality, the right stuttering and everything else, versus the rep who constantly switch between what's would never have learned that.
Right. So don't change the script. Okay. So then instead of trying to change little tactical things, what should the rep do instead?
Find one process, one framework that you like that works with your niche or your offer. I'm not going to say that there's a best one because I don't believe there is. I think it's a little bit different depending on the offer. But find one structure that resonates with you. Take that script, your first week using it, write it 10 times every day. That's not exaggerating, 10 times. And in between every time saying it, say it out loud. Or in between every time writing it, say it out loud. This is what I tell every rep. You write it, say it out loud. Write it out loud 10 times a day for the first week or two. And then after that, you just move down to writing it 3 times a day while you're doing all the calls.
Ah, damn. Why does writing it help?
It just ingrains it subconsciously in your brain. Like you no longer have to think. Somebody says something, and this is a really interesting point. You don't have to think about what you're going to say, so you're able to fully focus on what the prospect's saying. And when you fully focus on what the prospect's saying, that's when, going back to our conversation earlier, you're able to focus on the nuances. Their body language shifted. Their tonality shifted.
Okay, then on a line that you would like always write, rip it right now. Like rip one of those lines.
Prom awareness question. Do you like it? Like I guess besides XYZ prom, do you like, I guess, like the process you have like now though?
I like how you ran those stutters. Like that shit sounded very natural, but then it's like boom.
About it. I didn't
right? That's like Exactly, because you've ingrained it so hard. So that's you
Exactly.
going from the what, you now understand it, and then you added the extra layer of like the boom, 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 and
Exactly.
then like the pattern of the
The
speaking.
intentional stuttering, I
Very
don't
good.
even think about it. It's just natural.
Okay, that's a very nice thing. Okay, and another thing that you talked about more so in scaling the actual sales team, and this is less like sales oriented, much more focused on like the leadership component, right? You said there's two spectrums on how you should manage, and also like a component of management and training versus the actual compensation and
Yeah.
how that's in like some sort of matrix. So it goes a little bit more nitty gritty, but I think it's still useful to give a high level of,
Yeah, so this is more
which is like,
managerial and it's very sales
yeah,
specific. There's one
yeah.
end, which is like try and get everybody to decent, and there's one end, which is like unleashing potential. And I don't think you can do both at the same time, but you can implement aspects of both. The difference is if you're, and I'll give you examples, if you're trying to make the average a little bit better, you're not going to have those like superstar performers per se. And what that'll typically look like is like a higher base, a lower commission structure. It'll be a lot more day-to-day management of like going over numbers and data more than skill set. That's what I would say on that spectrum. The other spectrum is where most of the training and stuff is specific to skill sets, to getting better, to call reviews, stuff like that. And the goal isn't to make everybody the exact same. And so the commission rate will usually be higher and there'll be no base or a lower base. And there will be a lot more one-on-ones is the biggest difference that I know.
So it's like training each individual, trying to unleash their potential
Exactly.
versus a much more systematized approach and decent management, but higher system and like more group calls versus here it's more one-on-ones.
Exactly. Massive
And
difference.
what were you going to say about great companies?
I was going to say the best companies, in my opinion, they have a mix of both where they try and get the average up, but then they have potential to be able to like negotiate out bases and like have a higher commission. And then they'll do one-on-ones where they'll have like a certain person who's more focused on individual unleashing potential. And then they'll have people
Mm,
who are more focused on general team. And then they'll do like one-on-ones with individual like star performers to try and like unleash their potential. That's very rare.
interesting.
It sounds very obvious, but it's extremely rare in the industry.
Really? So the ideal though is like good management, a good base of moderate B player or A player closers that are good, and then one like S A plus player, or like a few of those that really unleash their potential, the entrepreneurial ones.
Yeah, the concept of like a sales leader is what I would call it.
Why is this, you said, uncommon industry?
I think it's because, in generally speaking, in every division, somebody will always gain power. If you have a company and they have one sales leader, for example, or like one sales manager, like head of sales, whatever it is, and they have a more higher base, lower commission, like more of that kind of structure, then if somebody else comes in who believes a lot more in unleashing potential, they'll usually be like, no, I don't believe in that. Even if they don't think about it consciously, but they'll
Uh,
just disagree with what the other person says. And so they'll push them out.
so you're talking about another rep who comes in and then becomes the sales leader and leads the other people versus like if there was a other sales, well, by the way, when we're saying sales leaders, guys, it's like somebody who closes and also does the management, runs the team meetings.
And just think about it, like even sales leader aside, just if you think about it just from a leader, like a leader in sales, whether it's a manager or whoever it is, a head of sales, they'll be either one side or the other side of the spectrum. And if somebody else rises into management in the sales department, if they're the same style, they'll get together well and they'll do the same thing. And so the company will stay there. If they have the opposite style, then that original person will push them out because they disagree with their opinions.
I see what you're saying. And so
Exactly.
that's why it's tough to have the both. Another interesting thing that you had was this feel, felt, found framework that you would use. Tell me about that.
I wouldn't use it. This is like a good example of standardizing. So like that's like a common objection handle, like door to door and stuff like that. But that's a really great example of like having one process and not really necessarily unleashing potential because that's a very average framework. It's not great. It's not a really great
Which
framework,
is what? What's the framework?
but it's like feel, I think you agree with them. So it's like, yeah, no,
I think it was something like, I understand how you feel. Others have felt the same way, but
exactly.
what they
Yeah.
found is
That's the
like,
feel,
yeah.
felt, found. And so it's a very average framework. Like that cannot make you great because you can't add a lot of nuance into it. It can't make you great, but it'll make everybody decent. But that's like one end, for example. Versus like at seventh level, when me and Yosh were doing all the team training, managing, recruiting, and everything, it was very like individual, like one-on-one coaching and stuff like that, and call reviews. So it wasn't like, oh, here's this general ass framework that you can try to implement. It was more like, you have this personality, you have this style, try wording this differently, try stuttering here because it'll work for you. It won't work for just
Interesting. So you prefer the unleash the potential of the individual high comp S tier mode.
100%. One-on-ones.
Isn't that less systematized though?
It is, but that's why at scale, it's very important because, for example, me coming in as a quote unquote rep, I would never have risen to that point if nobody was there to unleash my potential.
I think the real takeaway here is the fact of making this conscious, because there's people that don't know that this is an actual thing, where like some people prefer the base or the higher base and a good operational structure versus some people prefer the unleashing of power of reps. And so I think the ideal is that two managers, or even like one manager who has that conscious level of understanding, or maybe even two sales leaders that have that conscious level of understanding, and they play on both sides of the spectrum, and then one of them serve to pull up the operational infrastructure versus the other person serves to pull up the individuals, which then together they create a strong base and then a bunch of killers as well.
Exactly.
But tactically done, is that not usually how it works, or like not possible even?
Not at all. It's definitely possible. It just doesn't happen often because egos clash just naturally. That's
Fair enough.
Before, it was when Yash and I were there, et cetera, it was very much oriented towards like unleashing potential. Even like my potential, you could say, got unleashed because like I went from like rep and selling and everything to like training and managing and all that other stuff at the same time. And if I'd never done that, then a lot of the top reps there now wouldn't have been developed. So like there's a case for both sides.
And you're talking about how Alex Hormozy is the one who usually has like that follow the team structure, stick to it, versus other people, they do. I guess your side is that. Interesting.
From what I've heard, I think Alex has a lot more of like keep it all the same structure, but then especially on the sales side, but then on other teams and other parts of the companies, I think it's a lot more like unleash potential from kind of what I've heard.
Interesting. Oh, so I guess this spreads to different managerial, not just sales, but just management overall. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, interesting. So I guess in your journey, what would you have done differently?
If I start again from scratch, knowing everything I know now, the biggest difference, well, number one, I would go straight for sales and prioritize that. But number two, I'd focus a lot more on the mental aspect rather than the physical things. And this is something that hit me like really hard, especially when I moved in this place, like the place I wanted to get when I was like 50 years old. And I went in and it was super cool for like 12 hours. And after that, it was like, well, I'm just used to it. Like it's the same thing. That was like a really weird moment for me. And it hit me before, like when I bought my first Rolex, same thing. Like, oh, I wanted this. It was the exact model I always wanted, blah, blah, blah. 24 hours later, not that cool. That leaves a void inside of you of like, I've been so driven by this one thing and now I have it that it's like, if there's nothing after that, I might just crumble. And I think that leaves you in a really bad state. And it left me in a really bad state for a while after like every time.
Really?
Yeah. And naturally, I will say naturally, I'm a lot more of like an emotional human being, just naturally. And so it probably hits me a lot harder than other people. That was my driver from the beginning. It was always like, feel superior, be superior. And so once I have all these superior things.
You didn't learn that lesson before? Like I know for me, like I was watching Alex Becker and he would talk about how like no materialistic things is all BS. And I just learned that lesson that like the material things don't ever make you happy.
I heard it, but I never believed it. I heard like, it's not going to make me happy.
I always knew it.
I'll feel it.
Because I bought a bunch of stupid ass shirts when I was sneaker reselling and then I hated it all. I threw it all away and I was like, damn, this is stupid. I never did it
always
again.
Hit like hard, like same thing with the Rolex, the first Rolex I bought. I felt that way. And it was like, well, maybe it's because like my life isn't different. Like I'm not around different people and this and this and that. And it was like, oh.
So if I take the watch to the social groups, then that will make it.
If I get the penthouse and I have the watch, then it's different. But then after I got the first penthouse, same thing. But it was like, oh, it's like, it's not my dream penthouse. Like it's just a nice penthouse. So I got another penthouse. And then same thing. It was like, maybe it's just not in the right place. Like it's in Arizona, blah, blah. Maybe I need to be near family. So I got a penthouse here. And then it's the same thing. And then this.
So even recently, did you think that this would change anything?
I don't think I consciously thought it. I consciously thought it's not going to change anything, but I subconsciously thought it would change.
I've had that too. I see what you're saying.
But the thing that I kind of took away from it, because I journaled about it for a while, the thing I kind of took away from it was like, it's not about what it does for me, but about the people around me. Because even like I went back to my old school and I saw my old counselor, Miss Malixi. She's a freaking G. I don't know if she's hearing this, but I
teacher's a G.
My old counselor, all the other teachers, I'm not going to hate on them, but bullshit. But her, she was like, she took me through that shit in high school, like when I was getting made fun of and everything else. And I realized she's starting a business now. She wants to start a business. Not to take credit, but I think part of it might come from that. There's other
That's
people. He was
good.
telling me a lot of
Hey,
people.
bro, sell her some info, dog. Tell her to start dropshipping or some shit. 9 to 5 for Avatar right there, bro. Actually, his teacher is kind of a shit lead. Whatever.
And she even told me though. She even told me like a lot of the kids at the school talk about me, and they watch my videos in class and stuff, like in her class, and like she told me all that. So
Yeah,
it's
that
like
happens to me too. Yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
it's that story.
Yeah.
There's I saw it on Instagram a long time ago. It went super viral. I don't even know who the guy is, but he was saying he had a student, and the student he got him like 100K a month or something, and the dude he bought like a Lamborghini, and this mentor he was like, dude, like, why do you get this Lamborghini? Like, we can't work together anymore. Like, I told you I was going to mentor you under one condition, that like you didn't start chasing materialistic things. And the guy, he said, no, it's because when I go to the streets of my old hometown where all these kids can't even afford food, they can't afford anything nice, and they see that Lamborghini and they run up to me and they want to take pictures and selfies.
Is he just validating the Lamborghini at that point though, because he wants it?
No, I don't think so. Because like I would genuinely be just as happy living in a one bedroom.
Right. So I get the fundamental point you're making, which is that you have a place and therefore it allows you to prove what it does for others. The fact
Inspire.
that you're able to
Give them hope.
show the impact of it visually.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's kind of the thing I took away from it, is like not a way to fulfill me, but a way to fulfill others.
I like it. For me, the realization that I came to now with finances is that it's for power. Like, it has nothing to do with the materialistic things, but just the gaining of becoming more. Because with capital, it's a leverage point. When you're able to have a possession of money, then eventually you can take that and build softwares. You can invest into teams. You can launch things like that. You can launch capital intensive businesses. And yeah, that's what I've realized. And so for me, like, I think that's what I like about the money.
Yeah,
But I like that too.
that makes sense. No, I agree.
Cool. Okay. So for you, what are you slightly ashamed of, but that you feel like ultimately contributed to your success?
My motivation for starting, because my motivation for starting was always, and it sounds terrible, was wanting to be superior to everybody else, straight up, because I felt inferior. And I'm not even necessarily ashamed of it, because if not, I probably wouldn't say it. But like, that's the biggest point of like looking internally. This was something that shouldn't have happened.
What do you mean? Why do you feel like it shouldn't have happened? You feel like you should have just been a druggie?
It shouldn't have happened from the perspective of I couldn't realize the gifts that I had in the moment and how blessed I actually was with everything. And it was always focusing on like what was missing and what wasn't there rather than like what I did have.
What do you mean? Like when you were starting?
Yeah, when I was starting. Fundamentally, Tony Robbins talks about this a lot. I think it's really good. It's like you can have a kid in Africa with no money, no food, like nothing, and they're the happiest kid in the world. You can have a billionaire and he ends up committing suicide. The difference is that the kid is focused on what he has. He has friends, he has parents, he has family that love him. He's focused on what he has. He's focused on, at least I have this little amount of water. He's grateful for it. The billionaire and the really
I
successful.
got this amount of water right here.
Yeah, there you go. But the billionaire,
Sorry.
the really successful person who ends up suiciding, he's always focused on what he doesn't have. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough.
So you feel like you were too focused on what you didn't have. Henceforth, you always wanted more.
Which I'm glad, but I did it from the wrong place.
Now, where are you motivated from?
Now I'm motivated genuinely by mission. So I think like I have the mission right now of making sales education available to the youth for free. That is the actual mission that drives me day in, day out. That's the only mission or like slogan I've ever been able to say and actually feel motivated by.
I like that.
So like that's where it comes from.
So then I guess that perfectly transitions us into what you're next doing to execute on this mission of making sales education free for the children, save the kids, which is what your future plans are. What do you plan to do now?
Yeah. So I'll break down kind of the model as a whole. Again, that's my mission. So I wanted to build a business that could be sustained by that mission without me having to contradict it or sell a course.
And by the way, now you're out of Jeremy Minor.
Yeah.
Right. There's some messy things that happened there. We won't talk about it too much, but now tell me what you're on to next.
Yeah. So we have two kind of sides. First side is sales coaching, course, everything completely for free. So doing a ton of content, everything like pushing 2 reels a day, YouTube videos, everything, getting everybody into a group, courses, coaching, all of it completely for free. Then there's going to be a group that's going to be $97 a month where it's basically like, okay, if you want to get on an offer in the industry, join here. Right? So they don't need to join. If you don't want to join, great. You can fuck off. I don't care. Right? But the whole point of that group is like, if you want to get onto an offer, like take that next step, make that commitment to yourself, you can join here. The second side is we're doing consulting work with other businesses. Kind of the avatar is between like 500K a month, like 1.5 million a month, but we do work with like some smaller ones as long as we see that potential for actually growing. We go in, Yash and I will sell the offer ourselves. We'll do exactly what we did at 7th level, build out the sales process, document everything, and then recruit in a killer team, train them, and manage them ourselves. And that's
pretty much operating,
exactly.
right? Mainly coaches, consultants.
Mainly coaches, consultants for now, but we also have a fitness company we're working with, and we're kind of like moving into other industries, insurance as well, et cetera.
Right. And speaking of insurance, guys, it's going to be an interesting talk that we got with Tony as well.
Yeah.
Foreshadow there. But cool. I like the plan. And with all those different strats, though, the fact that although with myself, y'all watching, guys, you guys can find me on Instagram at Tim H. Yoon. It's the top link in the description. I'm much more active there. Where do you think people can find you?
Soon, everywhere. But for now, Instagram is probably the main one.
Nice.
Instagram, I'm going to start posting a lot more long form YouTube stuff, just helping people out, videos.
Right. So on YouTube and IG, guys, link in description. Go check out Andreas. And thank you guys for watching another show or another episode of the Tim Yoon Show. Peace out.